Hi, everybody. I'm Vincent Van Ho. I am the community lead here at Dark Times, and today we're bringing you episode 2, Evoking Emotion Through Dark Times. And I have with me our lead game designer, Miles, and he's going to be letting us in on the alpha behind the emotion of Dark Times. Talking about the core experience or feeling that Dark Times is designed to evoke in players, what emotions do you want players to feel as they are playing Dark Times?
Yeah, so it's a good question. We did a lot of research into the type of player fantasy we wanted to deliver. And our moral argument or our message in the game is the road to glory is brutal and cunning. It's a message that, a lot of people have gone through in their lives through their hardships, whether it be, I've lost a bunch of weight. I've actually lost like 40 kilos in the last 16 months. And the path through that, you even get the same kinds of emotions, right? The feelings of brutality and cunning and glory when you're thinking about your sets and you're actually getting into the research of things, you're tracking your calories. This is when you're starting to feel like you're a bit more clever in the game, right? A bit more cunning in the way you approach even just working out. And so you'll find that a lot of these paths that people go through, trying to fight for a position at work, trying to go through a long kind of fitness journey, even starting a company and building it, right? You will go through these kind of core emotions, glory, brutality, and cunning. And if we try and wind the clock back, you'll find a lot of the glory goes to the gladiators, right? They would fight in these arenas and they would be these warriors that everyone would come and pay to watch. They're almost like the ancient wrestlers, right? Of back in the day, only it was real. And so this is something that they brought a lot of brutality. They got all the glory, the gladiators. And when you look at what they had to do in an arena setting, the types of chaos that would be caused, the traps where you have animals let out or creatures let out to kind of join the battle. We're trying to capture a lot of this in the gameplay itself. And that's why I mentioned in the previous episode, wrestling as being a kind of key staple. And it's, really relates itself well to those ancient kind of gladiator battles, in Rome and stuff like that.
That's awesome. I really liked your analogy on the weight loss. That's such a cool thing to think about, honestly. Like, what did you say that tagline was again? Because I really loved it. Brutality.
Yeah, the road to glory is brutal and cunning.
How do the mechanics like executions and impaling contribute to these experiences?
One of the important things for me and the core pillar for me is a lot of the times there is a scale that we have in game design, and it's the difficulty, or let me call it complexity, versus the depth. And a lot of the times, if you add complexity to a game, more mechanics, features, it will add depth to the game, but at the sacrifice of complexity, right? You've now made it more
Right.
complicated. The best types of mechanics and systems are the ones that add a little bit of complexity but give you a whole range of depth. And this could be a lot of the times this is impactful to, if it's something that's impactful to the message or evokes one of these emotions, glory, brutality, and cunning. If it evokes one of those, it's a good mechanic. If it evokes all three, then it's like it's got to go in the game, right? And so when we talk about mechanics like executions and impaling, executions allow you to actually stagger an opponent, pick them up, and throw them into one of a number of different points that we have on the map that we have authored and crafted to really feel brutal and gory, and just the way that you have to approach the execution point. There's a bit of thinking involved. It's almost a little bit puzzly in that you have to kind of throw them into it, right? So if there's things in the way, you have to make sure you clear it. You've got an opening. You might have to use fire to burn down something that might be in the way to get them to the execution point. And so I really wanted to play around with the brutality and the cunning. And then the celebration afterwards, the animations, we spent a lot of time in the effects. We have volumetric blood. You can actually paint the snow red. So we wanted to go, we didn't want to go gross with it, but we wanted to take the Tarantino grindhouse approach. Tarantino is a really big inspiration when we were building this game, and the approach that he had to delivering the violence that you kind of need in order to really showcase the brutality of that fantasy that we're trying to build. Tarantino was able to achieve that in a tasteful way. And then we can look at other things too, like Conan, and those things kind of bring out ways on how to execute in a way that can make sense in this kind of format. And so, we play a lot with the celebrations and the over-the-topness of all of these execution points, from spike pits that you could throw enemies into. We even have execution points that are layered with a trap that you might not even notice initially. There might be some grass layered, and it just looks a little bit of a different color, patchy. You could set that on fire, and someone walks across it, and it'll just fall. They'll just fall, it'll break, and they'll fall into the spike pit. So we have a bunch of different execution points across varied locations too. We have an ice wall map that has a bunch of different ice types of executions, which you can imagine what those could kind of be. We have the forest, very green, and we have fire as a chemistry feature in the game. And so, you can imagine the things you could do with fire in a forest as well. And so really just playing around with making sure that it fits all three of those pillars. And the same thing for impaling. Impaling is one of those things that when you feel it the first time, the glory is like, the ratio was here. So we kind of had to lift the brutality as well, because one of the key things with impaling is we try to make it as systemic as possible. What I mean by this is that any way that you feel like it should work, the system has been designed with a rule set that keeps that consistent. When you throw a spear at someone, it will go through them, it will actually pierce them. And if there's enough force and you hit someone else behind them, you can shish kebab them. And if you keep going, and if there is more force, you can keep going until there's not enough force left, or there is a wall or something quite large, or let's just say has a lot of force behind it to actually stick in and impale. And you could have this spear with like 3 guys impaled to it. So it's a mechanic that a lot of the players we brought in to just have a look at the game and play the game through testing have really liked. And it's something that we feel again adds to all 3 of those. Just in the description you get the glory of 3 guys impaled with the 1 spear, the brutality of it, and just being clever enough to line that up and even think of that multiple shish kebab, or that shish kebab kind of combo in the heat of battle, right? But that's what we want to do, create this competitive game with a bunch of options and allowing you as the player to pick the best play for that situation.
I love that so much. So I can write my name in blood and make a human shish kebab all in the same game night, and that's what I'm here for. I love it.
Dark times. It is the dark times indeed.
Dark times indeed. Like, explain the visual choices and the world building processes behind Dark Times.
Yeah, so again, we started with that moral argument. Visuals is a big part of, I think, any experience that you're trying to deliver. And when I say experience, an artistic experience, so something like a film or a game. And if we're trying to do something that captures a message like The Road to Glory is Brutal and Cunning, then we want to make sure the visuals enhance that feeling. And when you feel those emotions like the glory and brutality, they lift those emotions even further. You start to get into this like really thematic, holistic kind of experience that you're building now, because all the facets tie together. So I mentioned Tarantino and Conan previously. Those are really 2 big ones because they allow us to capture the visceral combat in this kind of chaotic setting, like an arena or a gladiator battle, or Kill Bill fighting in that all those guys with the sword at the end. So that kind of chaos, that all that stuff you'll feel in Dark Times. But we also needed to acknowledge that we are a fantasy game set in the dark times, right? In the dark ages. And so we looked at more fantasy experiences like The Witcher that had a darker visual look to it, or games like Diablo. The glory you feel in that game from all of the feedback, right? There are a lot of VFX in that game to make you feel the combat. We're looking at a lot of Diablo for inspiration on how to sell these attacks and these moves. There's a concept in wrestling called selling. I'm giving away a lot of the business here, but when you get hit by someone, it's not a real hit, but the way that you sell that hit is really important to how the immersion of it, right? Because if you don't sell it like it hurt, you kind of almost make it look fake, right? So if there's this if Andre the Giant hits you in the face, even if he didn't actually do anything, you probably want to go flying across the ring or something. And it really comes back to when you're directing something like that, it's a storytelling experience. You want to be able to feel these emotions, right? And so you have to dramatize. We talked about that in the first episode, that there's a lot of the times movies and stuff try to be real and feel realistic, but then you're removing the drama by doing that, right? The immaturity or the unrealisticness of what a story actually is. And so we wanted to kind of keep that in there. And so we've approached it this way, with the over-the-topness from Tarantino and Conan, but then grounding it in this art style, dark fantasy art style of The Witcher, and then selling all of that craziness with really, really cool effects you might see in something like Diablo. So we use a lot in terms of the visuals, and these are just touching surfaces of like the key kind of touchstones, but we must have played a bunch of games like Gang Beasts and a bunch of stuff. There's a lot of good things that kind of shape that, but I think those 4 would be the key ones.